What the fuck is that? The thought slammed into Amara Vance's mind with the force of the torrential rain hitting her windshield. A mangled heap of something dark lay sprawled in the middle of the desolate industrial road, swallowed by the sheets of gray rain and the encroaching dusk. For a split second, her exhausted brain tried to dismiss it as a pile of garbage, a busted tire, anything but what her gut was screaming it was. But then she saw it. A hand, pale and unmoving, palm up to the unforgiving sky. Oh shit. No. The words were a choked whisper. Her car, a sputtering 10-year-old sedan that smelled faintly of crayons and desperation, skidded to a halt. Every instinct screamed at her to keep going. You're already late. You can't lose this interview. You have Zoe to think about. But the image of that hand, so utterly vulnerable, was seared behind her eyes. Fuck it. Before we dive into the absolute chaos that unfolds from this one single decision, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever stopped to help a stranger, if you've ever chosen the hard right over the easy wrong, smash that like button right now. And drop your city in the comments below, because you never know who in your own neighborhood is watching this and gets what it means to show up when it counts. Amara threw the car in park and bolted out into the storm, the icy Philadelphia rain instantly soaking her cheap blazer. "Sir! Oh God, mister, can you hear me?" she yelled, her voice swallowed by the wind as she crouched beside the figure. He was older, maybe late 50s, his expensive-looking suit soaked through and torn, shimmering with shattered glass. Blood, dark and slick, trickled from a nasty gash above his brow, mixing with the rainwater sluicing down his face. His eyes fluttered, hazy and barely conscious. The wreck of a luxury car was wrapped around a telephone pole 20 yards away, its horn blaring a single mournful note into the storm. With hands that shook so badly she could barely unlock her phone, Amara dialed 911. "There's been an accident," she stammered to the dispatcher, her voice tight with adrenaline. "A man's hurt. He's hurt bad. He needs help now." As the distant wail of sirens began to cut through the storm's howl, she shrugged off her own worn coat and gently tucked it under the man's head, creating a pathetic cushion against the cold, wet asphalt. Kneeling beside him, she ignored the frigid water seeping through the knees of her pants, the cold gnawing at her bones. He mumbled something, a garbled string of sounds, and his hand twitched, his fingers brushing against the fabric of her sleeve as if trying to anchor himself to her. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice softer now, a promise against the raging storm. "Help's coming. Just hold on." 15 minutes later, the flashing lights of the ambulance painted the scene in strobing reds and blues. As the paramedics loaded him onto a gurney and pulled away, Amara stood alone, drenched, shivering, and utterly defeated. Her phone buzzed, a cruel reminder of the life she was supposed to be chasing. Interview 9 a.m., Sterling Global Logistics. A glance at the screen confirmed her fears. It was 9:23 a.m. "Damn it," she muttered, wiping a mixture of rain and frustrated tears from her eyes. "I'm too late." But she couldn't just leave. She couldn't abandon the man whose life had just crashed into hers on a forgotten road. She followed the ambulance to the hospital. She waited in the sterile, antiseptic-smelling lobby, watching the clock on the wall tick away the minutes of her missed opportunity, until a nurse approached her with a clipboard. "He's going to be okay," the nurse said, her voice a beacon of calm in Amara's personal storm. "Mild concussion, no internal bleeding, but we need an emergency contact for his records and temporary billing." Amara hesitated. A chasm opened up in front of her. She didn't know his name. She had no legal responsibility. She was just a stranger who had stopped. And yet, the memory of his hand reaching for her, of his vulnerability, it was a hook in her heart. "I'll cover his bill," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The nurse blinked, her professional mask slipping for a second. "Are you sure? Just the emergency room fees." Amara nodded, a strange resolve settling over her. "I can't let him go without care." She handed over her debit card. It wasn't much, maybe enough for rent and groceries for 2 weeks if she stretched it thin, but it was almost everything she had left. Soaked to the bone, her interview blazer ruined, she stopped at a nearby hotel to dry off and call a cab. The lobby was grand, all marble floors and gilded mirrors, a world away from her reality of wet sneakers and a thrift store coat. She approached the front desk, mustering what little dignity she had left. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small. "May I wait here for a ride? Just 20 minutes, tops. I helped someone in an accident and—" The manager, a short, impeccably dressed man in a tailored vest, gave her a single dismissive look that raked over her from head to toe. He sneered. "We don't let loiterers in here. Try down the block." "I'm not loitering," Amara insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "I'm waiting for a ride. I just came from the hospital." "I don't care if you came from the moon," he snapped, his voice sharp and laced with contempt. "People like you bring down the place." Amara's eyes widened. "People like me?" "Don't play innocent," he scoffed, turning back to polish a glass. "Now move along before I call security." Something inside her, worn thin by exhaustion, poverty, and the constant grinding weight of being judged, finally snapped. It wasn't rage. It was a clarity so sharp it burned. She straightened her spine, her 5'4" frame suddenly feeling 10 feet tall. "You know what?" she said, her voice ringing with a cold, clear fury. "Shame on you! I just saved a man's life. I paid his medical bill out of my own damn pocket, and all I wanted was 5 minutes out of the rain." "But clearly," she said, her eyes locking onto his, "my skin tone is a bigger threat to your precious lobby than your own staggering ignorance." She turned on her heel and walked back out into the storm, the rain on her face masking the tears that finally fell. Later that day, back in their tiny apartment that always smelled of old pipes and her daughter's faint, sweet scent of bubble bath, 7-year-old Zoe climbed into her mother's lap. "Did you get the job, Mama?" she asked, her big brown eyes full of hope. Amara hesitated, stroking her daughter's hair. "No, baby, I missed the interview." "Why?" Zoe's face fell. "There was a man who needed help," Amara said softly. "I couldn't just leave him like that." Zoe's eyes widened. "Did you save him?" "I think so." A slow smile spread across Zoe's face. "Then you're a hero." Amara kissed her forehead, her heart aching with a love so fierce it almost hurt. "I don't know about that, sweet girl." After Zoe fell asleep, Amara sat by the window, staring out at the blurred city lights. She thought of the man's pale face, the blood on his temple, the way he tried to speak. On a sudden, desperate impulse, she opened her laptop and wrote an email to Sterling Global Logistics. "To whom it may concern, I want to thank you for the opportunity today, even if I couldn't take it. I know I missed my interview, and I understand if that disqualifies me, but I wanted to explain why. A man was injured in a car crash, and I stopped to help. I didn't do it for praise or recognition. I just couldn't drive past someone who was hurt. That's who I am. That's how I work. If that's not what you're looking for in an employee, I understand. But if there is any way to be reconsidered, even for a different position, I would be deeply grateful. Respectfully, Amara Vance." She hit send before the voice of doubt in her head could scream her down. 2 days later, while Amara was mopping the greasy floor of the diner where she worked her night shift, her phone buzzed. "Hello?" she answered, cradling it between her shoulder and ear. A warm, professional voice responded. "Ms. Vance, this is Deborah Riley from Sterling Global. I'd like to invite you back for a meeting, at the request of our CEO. Amara blinked, stunned. The CEO? Yes, Mr. Arthur Sterling, he insisted. I don't understand. Well, Deborah said, a hint of amusement in her voice, it seems you saved his life. Amara stood frozen, the mop dripping onto the linoleum floor. The rain had changed everything, but she hadn't seen the storm's full purpose until that very moment. She looked up at the flickering fluorescent lights, a single, whispered word escaping her lips. Thank you. The next morning, Amara walked into the sleek glass and steel lobby of Sterling Global Logistics for the second time. This time she was dry, composed, and held her head high. She was ushered upstairs to the executive floor, a hushed world of expensive art and quiet power, where Arthur Sterling himself waited. His head was bandaged, but his eyes were kind and full of a profound gratitude. You, he said softly, rising to shake her hand. His grip was firm. You're the reason I'm standing here today. I just did what anyone should have done, she replied, her voice steady. Maybe, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. But you actually did it, which is why I'd like to offer you a position here. Senior logistics analyst, full benefits, and if you accept, we'll also cover your daughter's full education, any school she wants. Amara's breath caught in her throat. The world tilted on its axis. My daughter, she said. Tears she didn't know were there rising in her eyes. Her name is Zoe. Then Zoe's future is secure, he said warmly. And just like that, everything changed. From a flooded street and a stranger's life hanging in the balance to the corner office, and a future she'd never dared to dream of. The power of one choice, one act of kindness, had not just opened a door. It had rewritten her entire life. The office smelled of cedar and leather, a scent so clean and rich it felt like it belonged to another universe, one far removed from anything Amara had known. Her new ID badge, gleaming under the cool fluorescent lights, hung from a lanyard around her neck. Amara Vance, Senior Logistics Analyst. She ran her fingers across the smooth plastic, half expecting it to dissolve into mist. It didn't feel real. She was sitting in her own office, on the 6th floor of Sterling Global's downtown Philadelphia headquarters. Through the massive window, she could see the Schuylkill River shimmering in the morning sun, a stark contrast to the leaky roof and flickering lights of the apartment she and Zoe called home. Mom, your desk is huge, Zoe had whispered in awe during a FaceTime call the night before, her small face peering into the screen. You look like a boss. Amara had laughed, a genuine, bubbling laugh that felt foreign in her own chest. But now, alone with the quiet hum of the computer, her fingers trembled slightly as they hovered over the keyboard. A small, persistent voice deep inside whispered that she didn't belong, that it was a mistake, that any minute they would find out she wasn't good enough, and this miracle would vanish. A soft knock on her door pulled her from the spiral of imposter syndrome. It was Deborah Riley, the woman whose warm voice on the phone had been the harbinger of this new life. Amara, settling in okay? Amara stood quickly, a flush of heat rising to her cheeks. Yes, thank you so much. I still feel like I'm dreaming. Deborah smiled, a genuine, knowing smile. You're not. Arthur doesn't extend offers like this lightly, especially not with the full scholarship perk. But he meant every word. He believes in people who show up when it matters. Amara nodded, but her eyes flickered with the uncertainty that still clung to her like a shadow. Deborah seemed to notice. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Listen. Not everyone here is going to understand why you were hired. Some folks, especially the ones who've been eyeing this position for a promotion, might feel displaced. Amara's throat tightened, Because I didn't come from some Ivy League business school. Because you didn't come from them, Deborah said plainly. But don't you let that get in your way. You've got instincts and real-world experience. You've already proven your character is solid gold. Around here, that counts for a hell of a lot more than a fancy resume. Just watch your back, and don't be afraid to ask for backup if you need it. Amara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Thanks. That means more than you know. As Deborah left, Amara turned back to her screen. The company's internal logistics dashboard blinked with a dizzying array of data: freight routes, warehouse delays, fuel consumption reports. It wasn't entirely unfamiliar. She'd managed systems like this before, just on a much smaller, grittier scale. She dove in. By noon, she had already flagged 3 glaring inconsistencies in the Midwest hub's warehouse load reports. The numbers simply didn't match the delivery schedules. She drafted a polite, carefully worded email to the head of Midwest operations, requesting clarification. The response came back almost instantly, and it was sharp, dismissive, and cold. Thanks for your concern, Ms. Vance, but this is standard fluctuation. Our team has it under control. It wasn't even signed with a name, just a sterile DEPT. Logistics Division. She frowned. Something about it felt off, not just the condescending tone, but the numbers themselves. Why was a massive shipment of electronics marked as in transit when it had been signed into a warehouse 2 days ago? Amara scribbled notes in a fresh planner. If there was one thing she'd learned from years of managing small-time freight yards, it was this: small errors always add up, and someone, somewhere, is always benefiting. That night, back in her own world, Zoe was already in her unicorn pajamas when Amara walked through the door. Her daughter launched herself off the couch. "Mama, you came back in one piece!" Amara laughed, kicking off the uncomfortable heels she'd bought on sale. "Barely. My feet are currently plotting a rebellion." They sat on the floor, eating microwaved mac and cheese, while Zoe colored a picture of a woman in a flowing cape. "Who's that?" Amara asked. "You," Zoe said, not looking up, "but superhero style." Amara smiled, a lump forming in her throat. "I'll try to live up to it." As Zoe dozed off on the couch a little later, Amara checked her phone. One new email, from Arthur Sterling himself. "Good start today. Deborah tells me you're already stirring the pot. That's a good thing, if you're right. Let's meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. I want to hear your take on the Midwest Logistics Report." She stared at the screen, a new kind of a flip in her stomach. Stirring the pot. The next morning, Amara arrived early. She wore the same gray blazer she'd borrowed from a neighbor for her second interview. Still a little tight in the shoulders, but clean and pressed. She stood outside Arthur's office, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Come in," his voice called. He looked better than he had the first day she'd met him in this office. The scar above his brow was a faint, silvery line, and his eyes were sharp, his posture steady. "Amara, sit. Tell me what you found." She opened her notebook, her hands surprisingly steady as she laid out her observations, pointing to the inconsistencies, the phantom shipments, the logical impossibilities hidden in the data. Arthur listened, his fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. "So, you're saying," he said finally, his voice a low rumble, "that our Midwest hub may be logging phantom shipments." "I can't confirm that yet," she said, choosing her words with care. "But either the inventory system has a massive flaw, or someone is creating these gaps on purpose." He nodded slowly, a dark look crossing his face. "It wouldn't be the first time. We've had issues there before. I need someone to go out there and audit it." Quietly. Her heart skipped a beat. "You want me to go?" "Do you want to?" he asked, his gaze direct and piercing. Amara thought of the hotel manager's sneering face, the condescension, the doubt, the way people looked at her like she was an inconvenience, like she didn't belong. She met Arthur Sterling's gaze. "Yes," she said. "I do." "Good," he said, a hint of a smile returning. "You leave tomorrow." As she stood to go, he added one more thing. "Amara, don't let anyone diminish why you're here. You earned this." "I'm starting to believe that," she said softly. And for the first time in years, she meant it. The morning sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Amara stepped off the train in Des Moines. The air was thick with the scent of diesel and morning dew, a potent cocktail of warehouse hustle. Her boots tapped a steady rhythm against the concrete platform as she rolled her modest suitcase behind her, its wheels catching occasionally on the cracked pavement. The Sterling Global Midwest Distribution Hub loomed like a concrete giant on the edge of the city, low, wide, and imposing. Trucks rumbled in and out of its gates like restless, oversized bees. Amara paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath to steel herself. This wasn't a field trip. She wasn't here to observe. She was here to uncover a truth, and in doing so, she might just have to expose a rot that ran deep. Inside, the monotonous hum of fluorescent lights greeted her, along with a front desk clerk whose tired eyes and overused smile told a story of long hours and low pay. "Name?" the woman asked, her voice flat. "Amara Vance, corporate." The woman squinted at her screen. "Oh, you're the one Mr. Sterling sent?" There was a distinct tone to the way she said it. Not disrespectful, but a mix of suspicion and surprise. Amara just nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "You'll be shadowing Greg Hastings, our logistics head." Amara's stomach tightened into a cold knot. Greg Hastings, the same department lead whose department had sent the dismissive email last week, the same man overseeing the very numbers that made no sense. She was being sent directly into the lion's den. She was escorted through long, beige corridors, past rows of cubicles where employees barely glanced up. Her blazer felt tighter than ever. They reached a glass-walled office where a burly man in a navy polo shirt and khakis was barking orders into the phone while sipping coffee. "That's him," the clerk whispered, then vanished as if she'd never been there. Greg looked up as Amara approached, his eyes flicking over her face, her skin, her badge. Something hardened in his jaw. "You're the one who sent that email," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," Amara replied calmly. "Well, congratulations," he said with a humorless smirk. "Now you get to see how things actually work, not just how they look on a spreadsheet." Amara forced a smile. "That's exactly why I'm here." For the next 6 hours, Greg paraded her through the massive warehouse, explaining every process in excruciatingly gritty detail. On the surface, everything looked smooth, efficient. Workers scanned packages, forklifts hummed their mechanical song, and charts updated in real time on massive screens bolted to the walls. But Amara wasn't interested in surfaces. She watched, she listened, and she took notes quietly while Greg bragged about efficiency metrics and cost-saving measures he'd implemented. It wasn't until she slipped into the records room alone, during what was supposed to be her lunch break, that she found the first real crack in the facade. A stack of invoices, poorly filed in a dusty cabinet, showed duplicate shipment IDs. One set was marked in transit, the other delivered, and both were dated the same day. She flipped through page after page, her heart starting to race. More duplicates. Some shipments had phantom destinations, warehouses that didn't exist in the company directory. She quickly and quietly took photos with her phone. Something was definitely, deliberately wrong. That night, in the small, impersonal hotel room the company had booked for her, Amara spread her notes across the stiff bedspread. Patterns began to emerge from the chaos of numbers. This wasn't just oversight. It was calculated manipulation. Someone was faking freight movements to skim profits, to pad fuel costs, to trigger performance bonuses, to game the delivery KPIs. It was a complex web of lies woven across months, maybe even years. She knew what she had to do, but a part of her hesitated. If she reported this, heads would roll. Greg's for sure, and possibly people under him, maybe even people above him. And she was the new hire, the outsider, a young black woman in a world dominated by older white men. From the outside, it wouldn't just be about fraud. They would try to make it about her. Would the company protect her? Or would she be the first casualty in the war she was about to start? The next morning, Amara walked into the hub like she owned the place. She made copies of everything she could, both digital and paper. She reviewed her timeline, lined up every fraudulent shipment ID, and created a confidential encrypted report. Then she called Deborah. "Are you sitting down?" Amara asked. "Should I be?" Deborah's voice was cautious. "Probably. I have proof of deliberate shipment fraud. Doctored records, fake destinations, the works. It's been going on for at least 4 months." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "I'm sending you the file now," Amara said. "I need to meet with Arthur as soon as I get back." Deborah's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'll arrange it. And Amara, be careful, you're playing with fire." "I know," Amara said, her own voice low but firm. "But someone has to." Back in Philadelphia 2 days later, Amara was ushered into a conference room on the executive floor. Deborah was already seated, her face grim. Arthur arrived moments later, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a flicker of raw intensity. "You found something," he stated. Amara slid the printed report across the polished table. "It's all in there." He scanned the first few pages, his eyebrows slowly rising higher and higher. "Damn," he muttered. "Hastings?" "Yes. And I suspect a few others are feeding off the system he created." Arthur leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "This is serious." "I know," Amara said. He looked at her then, a long, assessing look. "You understand what comes next, don't you?" "I do. There's going to be pushback, anger, accusations, and you're going to be in the middle of it all." Amara didn't flinch. "Let them come." A slow, approving nod from Arthur. "You're braver than most." He stood. "Deborah, initiate a full internal audit. Keep it quiet for now. Amara, I want you on the task force. Full clearance. You'll report directly to me." Amara's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. You didn't just earn your spot here. You've proven you belong here." She left the room, shaken but resolute. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was changing the system. That night, as she tucked Zoe into bed, her daughter smiled sleepily. "Did you have a good day at work, Mama?" Amara brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead. "I think I did something important today." "Like a superhero?" Amara chuckled. "Maybe." Zoe yawned. "Then I'll draw you with a bigger cape tomorrow?" And as Amara turned off the lights and watched her daughter drift into dreams, she whispered to herself, "Let them come." 2 weeks passed, and the polished walls of Sterling Global no longer felt so welcoming. The air had changed, grown tighter, charged with unspoken tension. Whispers danced through the hallways like ghosts. Glances lingered a second too long. Meetings grew silent the moment Amara entered the room. She wasn't just the new hire anymore. She was the woman who had cracked the system open, and the system did not like being exposed. On paper, Amara was thriving. She'd been officially promoted onto the Internal Ethics Task Force, reporting directly to Arthur Sterling. Her audit had triggered a cascade of investigations that now stretched across 3 regions. Several shipments had been flagged, and Greg Hastings had been suspended pending a full inquiry. But behind the closed doors and polite corporate smiles, the backlash had begun. "Amara, they're freezing me out," whispered Kelly, a junior analyst who had confided in her the day prior. "They think I helped you dig up that report." "You didn't," Amara replied firmly. "You've done nothing wrong." "Doesn't matter," Kelly muttered, her eyes darting nervously down the hall. "Perception is power in this place." Okay, I have to pause here. This is a critical moment. What would you do in her shoes? You've done the right thing, uncovered the truth, but now the entire system is turning against you, trying to isolate you and make you the villain. Drop a comment below and let me know how you'd handle this. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss how she fights back against this corporate machine. Later that day, Amara sat in her office reviewing a long list of freight inconsistencies when she received a message on the internal chat system. It was from an anonymous user. "You think you're better than us? You just got here." A moment later, another one popped up. "You'll fall harder than Hastings. Watch your back." She stared at the screen, her heart pounding a heavy, dull rhythm against her ribs. She wasn't afraid, not exactly, but the messages brought the war into sharp focus. This wasn't just about a broken system anymore. It was about the people who had built their careers, their lives, upon that brokenness. That evening, Arthur called her into his office. He leaned forward on his desk, his sleeves rolled up, his tone graver than she'd ever heard it. "We've received word that some of your audit files have been leaked internally. Redacted, but twisted. Someone's trying to turn this on you." Amara folded her arms across her chest. "Let me guess. They'll say I fabricated the evidence to get a promotion." "That's the narrative they're pushing," he admitted. "A few executives on the board are stirring up doubt. They're uncomfortable with how fast this all moved." "You mean they're uncomfortable that someone who looks like me uncovered what they either missed or willfully ignored for years?" Arthur didn't argue the point. She continued, her voice steady and clear. "I did the job you asked me to do, thoroughly and honestly." "I know," he said, his voice firm. "And I believe you, but this is the moment when loyalty thins out. I need to know if you're ready to push back, hard." "I'm not here to play it safe, Arthur," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "I'm here to finish what I started." He smiled, a faint, weary smile. "Then buckle up." The next morning, Amara was summoned to a boardroom. Half a dozen executives sat in high-backed leather chairs, their expressions a mask of corporate neutrality. The air was thick with pretense. "Ms. Vance," one man began, gray-haired, polished, and cold as ice. "We appreciate your recent contributions to company oversight. However, there are concerns. Serious concerns regarding your methods." "What methods are we referring to, sir?" Amara asked, her voice betraying none of the turmoil in her gut. "Your audits appear selective. The individuals implicated all happen to belong to one region, one managerial tier. Some are suggesting a bias, perhaps even a vendetta." Amara narrowed her eyes. "I didn't choose where the corruption was, sir. I followed the numbers. I followed the money. And I didn't look at a single name until the facts led me there." Another board member, a woman with a clipped, sharp tone, spoke up. "Ms. Vance, we've also received anonymous reports stating you pressured employees into handing over internal files without proper consent." "That is a lie," Amara said firmly. "And if those claims are anonymous, it's likely because the people who made them are the very ones benefiting from this cover-up." A murmur spread across the table. Arthur, who had been sitting silently at the far end, finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Let's be clear. Amara uncovered shipment fraud that was costing this company millions. Her work has since been corroborated by cross-regional audits. If anyone here would rather protect the bad actors in this company than face the hard truths, then perhaps your methods should be the ones under review. The room fell into a dead, shocked silence. After the meeting, Amara stepped into the hallway, her legs feeling slightly weak. Deborah was waiting for her. "That was brutal," Deborah said, her eyes wide. "But you held your ground." Amara exhaled a shaky breath. "I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I didn't expect this much resistance to the plain truth." Deborah looked at her for a long moment. "You scare them, Amara. Not because you're loud, but because you're right. Because you didn't ask for their permission to be excellent." That night, Amara took Zoe out for ice cream. They sat on the curb outside a small corner shop, 2 scoops of chocolate fudge brownie melting faster than they could eat them. "Did you have another big meeting today, Mama?" Zoe asked between bites. "Yeah," Amara smiled. "It got a little tense." "Did they yell?" "A little, but I didn't back down." "Good," Zoe said with the simple, profound wisdom of a child. "Because superheroes never do." Amara ruffled her daughter's hair, her heart swelling. "You're the reason I keep going. You know that?" Back at home, she checked her work inbox before bed. One message stood out, the subject line simple. "From someone you helped." "Amara, you probably don't remember me, but I used to work under Hastings. I was one of the people who was too afraid to speak up. What you did, it gave people like me hope. Some of us are ready to talk now. We're just waiting for a sign." Attached to the email were more internal documents, shipment logs, expense trails, all pointing to a wider, more entrenched network of manipulation than she had ever imagined. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't alone. She opened a blank document and began typing a new report, a deeper dive. They had started a war, but Amara had just found her army. The office was quieter than usual the next morning, but it was the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful. It was tense, loaded, like the heavy air before a thunderstorm. Amara walked through the hallway with measured steps, her posture erect. She no longer felt like a visitor here. She belonged, even if that belonging made her a target. People glanced up from their desks as she passed. Some offered a small, respectful nod, while others quickly lowered their eyes, unwilling to be seen as an ally. On her desk was a sealed envelope, plain white, with no return address. Her name was typed in a stark, generic font. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made the blood in her veins run cold. "Stop now, or everything you care about will pay the price." Amara stared at the words, her breath catching in her throat. For a single, terrifying moment, an image of Zoe's smiling face flashed in her mind. But she didn't tremble. She didn't let the fear take root. Whoever wrote this didn't understand who they were threatening. She'd already paid prices. She'd already lost things. They had underestimated the one thing that could never be taken from her: her conviction. She folded the note neatly and slipped it into her desk drawer. Then she opened her laptop and clicked into a growing folder she'd labeled Shadow Trail. Phase 2. The email from the anonymous employee had opened the floodgates. Over the next 24 hours, 6 more employees had come forward. Some sent encrypted files. Others sent personal accounts of being pressured to alter records. Amara cross-referenced everything, mapping the conspiracy into a timeline so damning it left no room for interpretation. It was a network of false shipments, inflated costs, and bonuses triggered on paper but never earned in the field, all orchestrated by a ring of middle managers who had grown fat and confident in the belief that no one ever looked too closely. Until now. Her phone buzzed. It was Arthur. "Morning," he said, his voice grim. "I've seen your new report. It's comprehensive and disturbing." "There's more coming," she said simply. "You've stirred something serious, Amara. I've called an emergency leadership review. 3 days from now, you'll be presenting your findings." Amara hesitated. "To the entire board? And the regional directors?" This time, no hiding. There was a beat of silence on the line. Then she asked the question that had been weighing on her since she'd read the threatening note. "Am I being offered protection?" Arthur's voice dropped. "You're being offered a spotlight," he said, "and a security team." She almost laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "So I'm not overreacting." "No," he said. "You're being smart." After hanging up, Amara leaned back in her chair, the pressure in her chest tightening. This was real now. The threats, the security team, the high-stakes presentation. She thought of Zoe, of her tiny hands and her bedtime stories and her limitless dreams. They couldn't afford to lose this, not after everything they had survived. That evening, as Zoe played with her dolls, Amara reviewed every single line of data, searching for errors, blind spots, or assumptions. She rehearsed the presentation in her head again and again, until it no longer felt like a performance, but a declaration of undeniable fact. 3 days later, she stood before a room full of the most powerful people at Sterling Global. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, the skyline of Philadelphia glaring in with what felt like judgmental sunlight. She adjusted the microphone, her heartbeat a steady drum in her ears. Then she began. 3 months ago, I was a single mother applying for a logistics position. I was late to my interview because I stopped to help a stranger who had crashed his car. That stranger, she said, briefly meeting Arthur's gaze, turned out to be the CEO of this company. That moment changed my life. But I didn't come here today to tell a personal story. I came to expose a professional one. She clicked the remote, and the massive screen behind her lit up with timelines, graphs, invoices, and internal memos. What you see here is not speculation. It is not theory. It is fact. Over the past 9 months, multiple Sterling Global regional managers have systematically inflated freight volumes, redirected phantom shipments, and manipulated delivery schedules to trigger performance bonuses they did not earn. We are talking hundreds of thousands in stolen funds, millions in misallocated resources, and worst of all, a culture of silence from those who suspected but were too afraid to speak up. She paused, letting the tension in the room thicken. But not anymore. Gasps rippled through the room as the next slides revealed names, account numbers, and undeniable audit trails. She didn't spare anyone, not even those with corner offices and long tenures. When she finished, the room was utterly silent. Arthur stood up. "Does anyone here have reason to dispute these findings?" No one spoke. He turned to her. "Amara, what would you recommend?" She met his eyes, her voice clear and strong. "An independent review, full restitution, immediate terminations, and then we rebuild the trust, starting by listening to the employees who have been overlooked for years." An older, skeptical director leaned forward. "And what if people think this is just about revenge, about ambition?" She didn't flinch. "Then they're still missing the point." After the meeting, Arthur followed her into the hallway. "You shook the whole damn building," he said, half grinning. "I didn't come here to make friends," she replied. "I came to fix what was broken. You did that, and more. The board approved your recommendations, unanimously. Several executives will be stepping down, and I've got one more offer for you if you're willing." She turned, curious. "I want you to lead a new division," he said. "Ethics and integrity. Internal audit, your own team, your own budget, your own rules." Amara blinked, the words taking a moment to land. That's a lot of power. It is, he said, but you've already proven you won't misuse it. She took a long, deep breath. Can I sleep on it? He nodded. Of course. That night, as Amara tucked Zoe into bed, her daughter looked up with a sleepy smile. Did you fix the bad stuff at work, Mama? I think so, baby, Amara whispered. I think we're finally getting there. Zoe hugged her tight. I knew you would. And as Amara looked out her window at the city skyline, her decision became clear. She wasn't doing this for glory or for titles. She was doing it for people like her. People who had been told to sit down, be quiet, be grateful, and accept less. Tomorrow, she would say yes. And then, she would begin again. Amara sat quietly at her desk early Monday morning, long before the building began to stir with its usual rhythms. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on the new brass plaque that had just been installed outside her door, Director of Ethics and Integrity. The letters gleamed like something out of a dream. But to Amara, they didn't represent prestige. They represented a profound responsibility. She was now officially the youngest director Sterling Global had ever appointed, and the first black woman to lead a department in the company's 62-year history. As she sipped her coffee, the elevator chimed, and Deborah Riley stepped into the quiet hallway, carrying a stack of folders. Thought you'd be in early, Deborah said, smiling as she handed over the files. Your new hires start this week. Amara flipped through the names. 5 team members, each one chosen not just for their credentials, but for their character. There were whistleblowers, former skeptics, and one was a single dad who'd lost a promotion after calling out his manager's shady expense reports. People who've lived it, Amara said aloud. That's what you asked for, Deborah nodded. People with skin in the game. Amara looked out the window, a thoughtful expression on her face. I don't want to build a watchdog unit. I want to build a culture where speaking up doesn't mean risking everything. That's a rare thing, Amara. Then let's make it real. That afternoon, she led her first team meeting in the newly repurposed space, an old executive boardroom that had been stripped of its heavy, formal mahogany table, and now featured open whiteboards, comfortable chairs, and windows that invited daylight instead of closing it out. First, she said as everyone settled in, thank you for being here. I know what it took for some of you to say yes to this. I know the risk. She looked around the table, pausing at each face. But you're not alone anymore. We're going to build this right from the ground up. We're going to listen, not just enforce. And we'll remember that ethics isn't about punishment. It's about the protection of people, of trust, of our collective integrity. A few people nodded. Their expressions visibly moved. We'll start by creating a reporting system that actually works, Amara continued. No more buried complaints, no more retaliation. Every employee at every level will know they are safe to speak. The team got to work immediately, drafting policies, testing platforms, and conducting workshops with floor staff. Within 2 weeks, rumors began to spread through the company, not of fear, but of hope. A truck operator from Milwaukee called the new hotline to report underreported hours and received back pay. A scheduler in Dallas flagged false overtime logs, and the system was fixed without her fearing for her job. When Amara followed up personally, the employees weren't scared. They were relieved. Finally, someone was listening. But change never comes without resistance. One morning, as she walked through the cafeteria, she overheard 2 men in suits whispering. She thinks she can just rewrite the entire playbook. She's got the CEO's ear now, untouchable, for the moment. Amara didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that when you step into power with purpose, the room always shifts. Some will welcome the light. Others will shield their eyes and curse its brightness. That evening, back at home, Zoe bounced into the kitchen holding a school flyer. "Guess what?" she beamed. "There's a writing contest. The winner gets to read their story at City Hall." Amara smiled, stirring a pot of rice. "That's amazing, baby. What are you going to write about?" "I want to write about you." "Me?" "Yeah, but you're a superhero who fixes broken places." Amara knelt down to her daughter's level, her heart full. "That's a pretty big story to tell." Zoe shrugged, grinning. "So is what you do." Amara pulled her daughter into a tight hug. In that moment, no title, no corner office, no paycheck could match the immeasurable worth of those words. 2 days later, Amara received an invitation to speak at a regional logistics summit, her first public appearance since the exposé. She wore a simple cobalt blue dress, stood behind a podium in front of hundreds of industry leaders, and delivered her truth. "I didn't get here because someone cleared a path for me," she told them. "I got here because I refused to walk away when the road got ugly." She spoke of ethics, but she also spoke of justice, of how too many corporate systems had normalized silence, rewarded manipulation, and punished conscience. She challenged every executive in the room to look in their own corners, not just point fingers at distant scandals. The standing ovation at the end wasn't just for what she said, it was for what she had lived. After the event, a woman in her 60s approached her, her eyes wet with tears. "My daughter works in freight," she said. "She's been fighting for years just to be heard. You gave her someone to believe in." Amara hugged her tightly. In the following weeks, Sterling Global's public reputation began to shift. Media headlines referred to the company as a model for internal reform. Job applications doubled. Employee satisfaction surveys showed a 40% increase in trust in management. But Amara didn't care about the numbers alone. She cared about the night janitor who now walked past her office and nodded with quiet pride. She cared about the cafeteria worker who left her a sticky note that read, "Thanks for seeing us." She cared about the single mother in the Atlanta office who emailed, "Because of your work, I didn't quit. I stayed and I fought." One morning, Arthur stopped by her office. "You've made me proud," he said simply. Amara smiled. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed. "But no one else could have led it." "Buen Tag." He looked at her a moment, then added, "The board wants to nominate you for the National Leadership and Ethics Award. It's a big deal." Amara paused, then nodded slowly. "Only if the team is recognized as part of it." "They are." That night, Amara found herself once again sitting on her apartment balcony, Zoe asleep inside. She looked up at the Philadelphia skyline, the city buzzing softly in the distance. She thought of where she'd started. A soaked coat, a stranger on the pavement, a missed interview, a single choice. Everything had changed, not because of luck, but because when the world demanded she walk away, she had stayed. She had seen the brokenness and decided to be the one who fixed it. And now, she was building a new table. One where everyone had a seat, where truth didn't cost you your silence, and where dignity was never negotiable. Tomorrow the work would continue. But tonight, for the first time in years, Amara let herself breathe. She had not just survived the storm, she had become it. Amara's story is a powerful testament to the idea that one person's integrity can change the world. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it gave you a little bit of hope, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories that matter, and never forget, your choices, your voice, and your character have the power to rewrite the world. Thank you for watching.